Production and distribution of City Club Forums on IdeaStream is made possible by the generous support of PNC and the Raskin Family Fund, with additional funding from Cleveland State University, Robert Conrad, and the Payne Fund.
Good afternoon, everyone. A little bit louder, please. That's much better. Thank you very much. My name is Philip Hediatny. I'm a senior at Hawkins School in Gates Mills, and I'm also the chair of the City Club's Youth Forum Council. I'd like to thank all of you for being here today and joining us for today's discussion. This is our council's last forum of the 2015-2016 season. And so before we begin, I want to take a moment to thank the entire team here at the Youth Forum Council for a great year covering issues vitally important to our city and our broader community. Our goal at the Youth Forum Council is similar to that of the City Club. We want to inspire and facilitate thought-provoking dialogue about the world we live in. And this year we tried to do that by covering police-community relations in the wake of the deaths of Tamir Rice, Michael Brown, and Freddie Gray in our forum Breaking the Code of Silence. The struggles of refugees that have found safe haven in our city, in our forum, Solutions to the Worldwide Refugee Crisis. How to unlock the key to your collegiate future in our forum on college admissions, and now our forum on gun control in America. But those discussions wouldn't be possible without the amazing support of the City Club, the financial support of our sponsor AT&T, and the hard work of all of the members of our council who called speakers, emailed our media partners, drafted questions, and moderated discussions. It's been an honor to chair this council, and I'm going to miss working with all of you next year. If you like what you see today, though, please get involved. We're always looking for passionate, driven students who want to make a difference in their community by harnessing the power of dialogue and debate. Applications to join the 2016-2017 council are going to be available right out there in the lobby. You can pick one up, and eventually they'll be available on our website at cityclub.org. Now, today's discussion holds an awful relevance to many of us, from communities in Northeast Ohio to communities across the nation. In its essence, it's a discussion that none of us would like to be having, a discussion on how to respond to increasing violence in our communities, much of which is committed using firearms. Guns mean different things to different people. To some, they're an effective method to protect themselves and their families from harm, acting in self-defense, guaranteed by the Second Amendment of our Constitution as a right to all Americans without fear or restriction by government. To others, they are the source of the carnage that increasingly envelops our city and other cities across America. 84,000 people suffer firearm injuries each year. 89 people die each day. And in 2013 alone, over 5,000 Cuyahoga County residents were the victims of gun crimes. But not all firearm deaths are due to crime. Of the 89 people who die each day from gun violence, 55 people, the majority, commit suicide. Of the 208 people who are shot and survive, 45 are shot unintentionally. Gun violence harms our communities greatly, but it's an issue far more complex than just crime. While it's a debate often phrased as liberty versus safety, liberal versus conservative, Democrat versus Republican, it doesn't have to be that way. Today, we want to cut through that left-right paradigm and discuss what we can do to stem this crisis and save those lives. How can public policy stop this carnage? And what should we, as youth, do next? Joining us for our conversation today are our panelists. First, we have Representative Nikki J. Antonio, representing District 13 in the Ohio House of Representatives. Representative Antonio serves as the Democratic Minority Whip, and she worked to propose the Safe at Home bill, which requires individuals convicted of a domestic violence crime to turn over their firearms to law enforcement. And second, we have with us today Angela Latson, whose son, Brandon White, was shot at the Chalk Lines Barbershop in Warrensville Heights in February. Since her son's passing, she's been a strong advocate for firearm policy reform. Without further ado, I'll cede the stage to my fellow council member and the moderator of today's forum, Tiolu Orasanya. Thank you.
Hi, everyone. Good afternoon. Welcome to the last forum of 2016. It is my pleasure to moderate this forum, and I hope that we make some progress today on this contentious, heart-wrenching issue. My first question to the panelists, How has gun violence personally affected each of you? Ms. Ladson, if you would like to go first.
I thought these glasses were not. Okay. They might be a little crooked. I'm sorry. Well, it has affected my family deeply. I don't know if you heard or you just heard recently. Are they crooked?
They're fine.
No, they're fine. Okay. I'm sorry. My family has suffered much loss in this city. I am the mother of the two sons that was killed, one in the Chalk Line barbershop killing in February the 5th, 2015. On June 4th, my other son was killed in his grandmother's driveway by a gun. We had to face a horrific tragedy, a mother without sons, sisters without brothers, and a father without his sons. A mother should never have to bury her children. They're supposed to bury us. It is all because a person having a gun.
And I grew up on the near west side of Cleveland. And when I was 11, there was a shooting on my street. And the shooting involved a family on one side of the street with a family on the other side of the street who had been best friends. And one of my child friends was caught in the crossfire, as well as their parents. When the shooting stopped, one of her parents was paralyzed for the rest of his life. The woman from across the street was murdered. When I had to get up and go to school the next day, the man with the weapon was still at large, and I was terrified to walk down the street, terrified to go to school. My mother said I wasn't allowed to miss. I thought that was cruel. And I, like many other children, who walk down the street every day in fear, not knowing if they'll be caught in a crossfire. That was my experience. Since then, I've been an advocate for sensible gun laws. And when Tamir Rice was killed at Cadell Recreation Center, that's in my district, we stood with the families, stood with the neighbors, trying to sort out and understand something that is beyond comprehension. And it still is. As Angela said, no parent should ever bury their child. And so the last thing I'll say is when my daughter was 13, she had a very close friend who she had befriended over the summer commit suicide with a gun, with his father's gun. And so it touches all of our lives, and I think if we asked each one of you, you have your own story of how gun violence has touched your lives. So together, I'm hoping that we can find some solutions.
Thank you. Before we continue, I would like to give us 3 examples of countries that have instituted gun control or restrictions on the ability of the people to procure firearms and see what the long-term effect of those regulations and those laws have been. In Australia, are one of the examples. There was a massacre in 1996 in Port Arthur, and immediately the government acted and they put in place a Firearms Act. And before that, 6 years before the Firearms Act was put in place, 3,836 people had been killed by firearms. And 6 years after, 1,992 people have been killed by firearms. Now, today in 2014, there were only 230 deaths as a result of firearms in the entire country of Australia. However, the homicide rate is 1.8 people for every 100,000 people, which is also the same crime rate it was the year before the 1996 Firearms Act was put in place. So yes, there was a reduction in gun violence, but there was no reduction in homicide rates overall. The weapons used just changed. Our next example is the United Kingdom. In 1997, there was a school shooting in which 18 people were killed, including the shooter. They immediately passed the Firearms Amendment Act, making it virtually impossible for a regular citizen to procure a firearm. Even the police in London and in the UK, as most of us know, do not carry firearms. Since then, there has been a steady decrease since 2001 in homicide rates. In 2013, there was reported to be one homicide for every 100,000 people. As a result of the Firearm Act, the United Kingdom has one of the lowest homicide rates in the world. Now we have Germany. This is a bit of a throwback to the early 20th century and the Weimar Republic. The Weimar Republic required that everyone get a permit to buy a gun, and eventually they extended that to any weapons, including knives, anything that could be used to kill someone. Now the Third Reich, they used these rules to prevent people that they deemed untrustworthy or unreliable from procuring weapons. They not only did that, they rescinded permits because they decided that people were no longer reliable to carry permits. Now in the United States, on average, as Phil noted, every day 297 people are shot. On average, 89 die, 208 survive, making for every year 108,000 people are shot, 32,500 die, and 76,000 survive. These are all homicides and attempted murders committed with guns. These include accidental shootings, suicide attempts. Now, as we transition into the next question, the only difference between these three countries that have tried gun control and the United States is that they don't have in their founding documents an amendment or a rule that prohibits the government from infringing on the right of the people to bear arms. The Second Amendment of the United States Constitution states, "A well-regulated militia, being necessary to the security of a free state, the right of the people to keep and bear arms shall not be infringed." My question to each of you is, what do you believe was the original intent of the Second Amendment, and how is that applicable to 21st century America?
Well, I'll start. I think originally we have to remember that the world was a different place in the United States when the Second Amendment was formed. We were still, in many parts of the country, a frontier. Cities were forming and were not necessarily safe places, but people did not think about arming themselves in the city to protect themselves from each other. They still had a mindset of protecting themselves and fighting against a king across the ocean in another land, because that militia that they wanted to form was really to make sure that no one was going to come and tell them what to do with their country anymore, because we had declared our independence. And so being able at the ready at any time to have folks who were farmers, folks who worked in factories, be able to go home and get their weapon if there was a threat from another country, especially the country had been controlling us, England up to that point, was in the minds of the people then. I think we live in a different age now, and it's interesting, before the 1990s, when people were asked why they owned a weapon, the majority of Americans said they owned it for hunting. After 1996, when they were asked that question, they said they owned it for protection. What changed? Well, one of the things that changed was there was a ban in 1996 put on the CDC, which is the Centers for Disease Control, to continue to document and research gun violence. They were not allowed from that point forward to actually do the research to find out what was happening with gun violence. I think that the two are related in some way. It's an interesting statistic, but I think it really shows the mindset of our country.
Well, from my perspective, I used to drive the RTA. I did it for like 16 years. And you see the city change, you see the attitudes change, you see different types of atmospheres change, shall I say. When we did have guns, when people, like you said, when we had guns, it was for our protection, or someone had a protection for our home. But now, because of the Ohio laws that has open carry, now people, it's so easy to get guns now. And I think the problem is we need to enforce some type of laws, because it's too easy for our country, for the United States, for the nation, and for young people to get guns. Truly true. Okay.
Thank you. My next question is, how do each of you feel that has the U.S. government's response to gun violence and mass shootings in this country been adequate, or has it been lacking?
Well, I think, every time there's been a mass shooting, there's been discussion, there's been outrage at the beginning, there's been sadness, followed by sometimes silence, and then in the cases that really shock me, especially in the state of Ohio, they're followed by more laws that make it easier to carry a gun in more places. The state of Ohio recently, I voted no, but passed a bill that allows for people to carry guns in daycare centers. Now, it doesn't make any sense. It boggles the mind why someone would do that. The rationale that we're told by the gun manufacturers and the lobbyists for the gun sales is that this is to protect you. And yet, any of the statistics that other agencies do keep show us that indeed we're not protected by guns, and in fact, we're more vulnerable. The more guns that are in a home, the more likely it is that we will be hurt by those guns in that home and possibly killed. They are not protecting us as people think, but the response has really been, as far as I'm concerned, confusing.
Absolutely. To me, to see so many young people with guns, the response to me, as far as the state, as far as the nation, is very slow, because at some point, the laws that have been enforced are not working. They're not working at all. And even if they put a law in place, then the first law that they have have not been enforced in the first law. And so what happens is they have all these laws in the books and nobody's doing anything. So it's continuous, a repeat cycle of these kids getting guns constantly, all the time.
And can I say too that what's also stunning is that when the American people are asked what they want sensible gun control. They want sensible gun laws. More than 90% of Americans want that, and yet they're not getting the policies that they're really asking for, that they really want to see, and that's a problem.
In your eyes, what would be the ultimate solution to gun violence? What would be the ultimate either gun control bill or law that should be put in place to solve most of the issues involving gun violence?
If I were queen of the world, there's a lot of things I'd change. I think it would start with, we would have to reset our culture and our attitudes about violence, about what guns, but about how we deal with, how do we respond to anger? How do we respond to situations that frustrate us? And do we have the skills and the coping mechanisms to do that? Because so many times a friend kills a friend and it's over something silly. And yet, at the end, it's tragic. Or there's a fight in a domestic violence situation, and there's an argument and misunderstanding. But if a gun is available, then suddenly that escalates from an argument that two people are having that could possibly be resolved to a tragedy where one person may be dead and the other is going to spend the rest of their life in prison, or both people are dead, or maybe some children as well. And so I think it starts with, how do we have coping mechanisms for dealing with our anger and dealing with conflict? So for those of you who are in schools that have conflict resolution programs, I hope you participate in them, because I truly think they can be life-changing. And then the next step is, we also have to really recognize that having a weapon is not going to protect one from a situation that's the ultimate answer. And finally, there are many, many things that can be done with the gun laws. Everything from gun show loopholes, where people can get weapons when they shouldn't be purchasing them because no one's done a background check. For law-abiding citizens who are responsible gun owners, that's fine. They need to be able to have their Second Amendment rights. But we have to be able to know who should not have a weapon and be able to screen for that.
I had the opportunity to talk to some inmates, and I asked some of the inmates that had killed. And I asked them, I said, why is the reason, what's your mindset of killing? And he literally told me, he says, ma'am, it's no reason. It's just for power. And I said, power to do what? He says, well, we don't consider the families, we don't consider the mother, we just have a job. And to hear that, a mind saying, we just want power, because, I mean, what type of power are we looking for with a gun? You know, you're intimidating, you are, people are frightened in the communities, people are upset in the communities because of a gun, which is supposed to have been for hunting, which is supposed to have been for protection. I was at a gas station, and a lady was strapped because of the Ohio laws today. She was strapped at the gas station. I knew she wasn't a cop. I knew she wasn't a police officer. However, because it wasn't covered. So to be at a gas station with a gun, I mean, pumping gas, come on, it's out of control. And at some point, we need to have some laws that will enforce these guns, because too many people, and you know, it's just too much. I keep saying that because too many young people have guns.
And I think it's troubling that when you enter a school or enter a daycare center, or sometimes even a church, that you're seeing a sign that says no weapons here. Well, that's great, but what that means for all of us, the message that it's giving us, is that we assume everyone is carrying a weapon. This is just one of the exceptions to the places you can't carry it in, as opposed to saying we are a society that functions peacefully with each other, and that we don't feel the need to be armed every second of the day.
A large statistics show that a large number of homicides or deaths due to gun violence are suicides. So how do you think that gun control or more restrictions on guns and who can own them will reduce the suicide rate?
Well, I think first of all, it's in some ways it's too easy if the gun's available. One of the bills that was introduced by one of my colleagues that's gone nowhere is just to have gun locks, you know, to have the lock on a gun. So if you own a gun and you own it responsibly in your home, can it be locked up so that it's not so easy for someone to, when they're despondent, when they're upset, to be able to get to that so quickly. That's problematic. We also need to really be able to have more mental health services in line for people, so that and to take away the stigma of being upset, of being in a situation of either depression or distraught, that there are places to turn to instead of feeling so alone, that there's no alternatives. So I think it's a combination of lessening the weapons that are available, but also increasing services to really help people when they need to reach out to someone, and being sure that there's someone there to reach out to.
I had a discussion also with a detective, and I asked him, how do you cope with the streets? And he said that he would have to listen to some of the music to even keep up with some of the violence out here in the streets. So it's a oxymoron. You have the guns and you have the music. And at some point, there should be some type of solution. Now, when a domestic violence, a gun violence, there should be some type of mediator where someone is able to talk to somebody before we escalate to that point. Unfortunately, the deaths that took place after my sons were killed was over 106 deaths, less than 6 months. So now it's triple that amount in here in Cleveland. It's because of guns. So at some point, we really need to, sit down at the table once again and to enforce those laws.
We have time for one last question. What do you think students can do, people going to school who are busy but want to have a part in this conversation and in resolving the issue of gun violence?
Well, I think it's important to educate oneself about just what the standard is right now, and what kinds of things are happening in your local communities or on a statewide level. I've introduced, as was mentioned earlier, a legislation that would take guns out of the hands of people who have been convicted of domestic violence, which puts things in line with the federal law, but also would also give local law enforcement the opportunity to ask, when a protection order is given for domestic violence, are there guns in the homes? Are you fearful? And remove the weapons for the period of time for the protection order. And what that does is it gives a cooling off period for folks. So that's just one example of how to educate. I also think it's important to talk to each other about, if somebody has a weapon, and do they really need to take that with them, especially wherever they're going with you. And I think the more conversations we get to have, that it's not cool and that it's not a good idea, because it's also very, very dangerous. I mean, I don't know how many accidents happen where somebody didn't even intend to kill somebody. They were just showing them the gun. And they ended up killing their best friend, ruining their life. So I think it's educate yourselves and communicate with us. Certainly policymakers, tell us what you want, what you would like to see, because it's really important you understand those systems now so you can help us in the future.
As a mother, I'm looking at the mother aspect. When you are frustrated, even in school, when you are frustrated, don't allow the peer pressure of the community, don't allow the peer pressure of the schools and what you do and what you do not have. What happens is, the old saying used to say, it takes a village to raise a child. But unfortunately, we're not at that age now, because when another parent or someone speaks to another child, then there's a conflict, and then eventually in a results maybe a gun violence, something with the gun violence. So at some point, I think the protection that we need as far as the schools, talk to somebody, tell somebody, talk to your parents and tell them what you're feeling and how you feel, and don't take it to the next level. And if your parents can't talk to you, talk to someone else that you feel that's close to you, because it should not come to this. We should not be here. We should not be at this level of so many guns killing our young folks. So the solutions, I feel, is open yourself up. Don't worry about the peer pressure. Don't worry about who's saying what. And mothers and fathers, listen to your children, care about what they're saying, and that, that's what we need to do to bring that love back into our communities and what we need.
So statistics also show that most gun violence is committed by people under the age of 21, people our age. And there are already gun control laws prohibiting someone 21 years of age, younger than 21 years of age, from owning a gun. So what more do you think can be done to reduce gun violence among teenagers?
Well, again, in addition to what Angela's been talking about, I think it really, again, I think we have to shift. There's some personal responsibility that comes with being even in your teens, in terms of knowing that the decisions that you make can impact your entire life. One wrong decision can change everything. And certainly that's the case with guns. And so I think it's important, I want to reiterate, to talk to each other, to talk to people that you see as positive role models, that you see as people who will listen to you when you're concerned about this, and frankly, to try to equip yourself with other ways to cope in those situations that are either violent or hostile. To be able to walk away could clearly save your life. Just to walk away could be the difference between how your life goes from that moment on.
I work at a mental place for the city, and to see so many young people that need help mentally, it saddens me, because you guys are the next generation, and we have to be stronger. And to see so many people taking medication because of either they didn't get an opportunity to talk, they didn't get an opportunity to anger, and whatever it may be. But we got to get stronger here in the city of Cleveland and all over the nation to stop this gun violence. I'm sorry.
That was great, and so ends the moderated part of our forum. Anthony?
Thank you. Let's give a round of applause, actually, to them. That was a really great conversation. Well, good afternoon, everyone. I'm Anthony Price. I'm Vice Chairman here at the City Club of the Youth Forum Council and Senior at Shaw High School. I want to thank the panelists again and Tiolu for this amazing conversation. I hope you learned something from this conversation. Today, we're enjoying a forum on gun control featuring Miss Angela Lattison, State House Representative of District 13, Miss Nikki Antonio, as well as our moderator, Tiolu Orenzanya. I hope I said that right. Now we would like to turn today's program over to our traditional question and answer session from all of you, the audience, obviously, and teachers. You can feel free to ask a question as well. Student attendance is made possible by generous support from AT&T. We welcome questions from everyone, City Club members, guests, students, or those of you joining via our webcast. If you'd like to tweet a question, please feel free to tweet it at the City Club, or at City Club Youth, and our staff will try to work on it to the program. We want you to remind that your questions should be brief and straight to the point. Holding the microphones today are Solon High School Youth Forum Council member Kenya Hell. And then from Hawkins School is Justin Tinker. I hope I said that right as well. So maybe we have the first question, please. Thank you.
My name is Jasmine McCoy, and I go to Solon High School. My question is, the United States keeps nuclear missiles as a deterrent for other nations. Why is it so wrong for citizens to keep guns as deterrents for other citizens?
Well, so again, I don't know that it's not wrong, and we have Second Amendment rights that say it's actually constitutionally sound for one to be able to own those weapons and be a responsible gun owner. I think the key is responsible.
Hello, first I'd like to offer my condolences to you. My name is Angelique Patton. I am a Mandel Scholar with Cuyahoga Community College. This is oh so very hard of a topic and a conversation, but nevertheless, you know, I say gangs, ISIS, wars, beliefs, abuse, all of the above contribute to gun violence. When we speak about our youth today, and I look around this room, all lives matter. And want to perpetuate a crime upon another in any shape, form, or fashion. But my question to you ladies is this: do you believe the fact that parents' rights were removed and the fact that they took God out of schools contributed to the fact that we have so many youth contributing with gun violence?
Good question. I do believe a lot of our problems is because we took God out of the schools. I'm gonna say back in the days where we used to contribute to the flag, when we used to say prayers in schools, at some point, there's so many people speaking and we're not getting things done. We're allowing things to be taken away from the table. Prayer, a lot of school activities, a lot of the programs in the summer activities are taken away. But unfortunately, absolutely, wholeheartedly, prayer, and we took God out. And this is the results. We may not believe it, we may not want to believe it, but we took God out, and this is the things that's happening.
So I have a little bit different perspective. I think I remember when prayer was taken out of school, I was really, really little, and my mother was really, really upset. And I didn't understand it at the time because I was pretty small. But I think I have had wonderful quality school experiences. My children, we have 2 daughters, have had good school experiences, and sometimes there were difficulties. But I think as a society, I mean, I talked before about sort of resetting how we respond to things, and I think there needs to be a definite reset that has at its grounding personal responsibility for ourselves, a respect for whatever practice someone else has, and whether that's a religious practice or no religious practice. But I think the grounding of it is in respect for the person in front of me, that I see you and I respect you, whether you agree with everything that I believe in or not, and that together we both have a place on this planet that's of equal importance. If we could get back to that as a society, I think that would be helpful. Guns are too easy and too easily available, but we know that they're permanent. There's permanent ramifications from using them.
Hi, my name is Sharnae, and I'm a senior at Shaw High School. And my father actually was killed back in 2008 because of gun violence. And I was always taught to never hang around the wrong crowd. But I'm kind of a people person, so I want to know that, is there anything that we can do as a community to help the people of the wrong crowd?
Well, I'm sorry for the loss of your father, and I appreciate that you're here today and that you're asking that question. I think, again, what we have to ask ourselves when we're with any people is, I don't know that, I worked with kids that had behavioral problems that were troubled. They were labeled as troubled youth. I learned a lot from them. Part of what they told me they needed always was the respect of other people. And when they didn't get it, they reacted in some inappropriate ways. But I think we each have some kind of a little, it's called our conscience, but sometimes it's referred to as your gut. You know, I think, and you should listen to your gut. We get into trouble when we don't listen. It tells you, you need to leave here now. Nope, this person is saying things that are just going to get you in trouble if you stay with them. And I think if you really listen to your gut and know those situations, you will know who are the best people. The best people for you are the people who lift you up, who say, let's be better. Let's go do this because it's fun, but we'll be better for it. The people who want you to go down a path and take you to a place that you know could be dangerous, you know in your gut that's not the place to go.
And my condolences to you also. But just like she said, as a young adult, you know, most of the times people who are negative has a tendency, they want attention. And so sometimes you can kind of stay away from people who gravitate to attention. I want attention, and bullying and things like that. You kind of know in school to pull away from certain people like that, because that is cliche, the wrong crowd. Until they receive help, then the best thing for you to do as a young adult is just to stay away from those type of people, just because it increases violence, it increases gun violence, it just constantly increases.
Hello, my name is Aaron Jeter. I teach history at Solon High School, and my question is for Representative Antonio. And again, my condolences for your loss and everyone else in this room who has suffered a loss because of gun violence. I know California is planning to the California Senate is going to attempt a vote to ban assault weapons with easily detachable magazines this week. I wanted to know Ohio's position on that as far as assault weapons ban and where Ohio is with that policy.
Well, thank you for the question. Ohio's position, there isn't a position right now because there isn't a bill before us, so in that way to ban any type of weapons. As I indicated before, we just keep expanding the ability to open carry in this state to the point that I think has really gone overboard and is kind of ridiculous in nature of where people can open carry. It puts the onus on businesses and gathering places to actually indicate to people you can't open carry here because we don't want you to. But as far as assault weapons go, I don't understand, and this is my personal opinion, but as a policymaker, if there was a bill before me to ban assault weapons, I would vote for it to ban them. I don't understand why people need in any community to own an assault weapon, what good positive purpose it has. I know when I've asked my colleagues about this who support people's right to own them, that they say they use them for sport.
Hi, my name is Jesutomio Decoya, and I go to Solon High School. When I walk around the school, I see security officers there, and I feel protected because if there is ever an intruder, I know there'd be someone there with a gun who can protect us. But there are certain public areas that don't have that kind of protection, like daycares and churches and other public areas like that. Now, when you mentioned that you didn't really understand why people felt a need to have open carry guns in daycares, those are essentially gun-free zones. So if criminals don't follow laws, how do you expect them to follow those gun-free zones as well?
So it's a very good question. I really do believe, though, we have a decision as a society to decide whether or not we want to live in a police state or not. So if we feel so unsafe that at every door to every public establishment we need to put a sentry with a weapon, then I am very, very sad for our society. The statistics that we do gather and that Harvard and some other folks gather tell us that arming our society does not, in the long run, protect us as individuals. It actually makes us more vulnerable to an attack of some sort by a weapon, being in the crossfire. I think the statistics that we heard from England and how few murders they have with guns. A violent society, we can still be violent, but it takes a whole lot longer to kill somebody with a baseball bat than it does with a gun, right? And so I don't know that I want our society to get to that point. I understand the fear that's involved. I am so sorry, as somebody who is older than all of you in this room, that you have grown up in a place where these mass shootings, there's more and more, and where bad people come into schools and threaten you and put a pall over what it's like to be in a public gathering. But we are an open society, and we need to maintain that and do everything that we can to be sure that we're not going down the path of having to arm every single person and have a guard at every doorway. So I think it's up to us to really look at what else can we do and how do we interact with each other. We have laws to protect to a point, but I guess the other thing is there's nowhere that's completely safe for us. And that's also a reality of our lives. But I think there's other ways that we can address that rather than having a gun every single place, because I don't think it will protect us anyway.
Can I say something? It's really sad to, everywhere you go, you got to have a gun. But you have barbershops, you have beauty shops, you have daycares, you have places where you're supposed to sit down, have a conversation, let your hair down, whatever it may be. We shouldn't have to be in a place, as far as barbershops and beauty shops and places like that, that we have to not be so fearful to sit there and have a conversation, to get your hair done, to get your, whatever it is, it should not be at that place right now. We should not be at this place where guns are controlling America. We shouldn't be there.
Hi. So I wanted to kind of ask a question, because I think we can all agree to an extent, especially in our country, that guns and the numbers of people who have them, it's both an issue of public policy and it's also an issue of culture. And we do have a culture in this country that states that it's necessary to have a gun, that you should have a gun for hunting or you should have a gun for protection. My question is, if measures are being implemented to enact gun control within the United States, and we've seen on the right end of the spectrum, we've seen some backlash in the past, at what point do certain gun control policies cause additional negative effects when having a gun ends up being a counterculture if the culture begins to marginalize those people?
Well, and I think that's a really good question, but I want to I guess counter one thing at the beginning of what you said, which is I believe we're at the point where we respect Second Amendment rights for people to own and carry a gun. I don't believe it's a necessity, and I don't believe that it is not necessary for every person in this country to own a gun. And so I'm hoping that we continue down that path, that there's plenty of people like myself that feel like it's not necessary to carry a gun or to own a gun. I understand what you're saying about marginalizing people. I think that's why the conversations have been delicate at best in terms of being respectful of responsible gun ownership and also recognizing that there's some kind of line that gets crossed. And whether that line is California's General Assembly looking at banning assault rifles, which we had a ban on years ago. You were not allowed to own an assault rifle in this country in the 70s and the 80s, but then the ban was lifted. So I think there are things that can be done to be respectful of those responsible folks, and at the same time also be respectful of the 90+% of Americans who have responded to surveys who say they want gun laws to be changed so that loopholes are filled in and things are changed, because that's what they want, to feel safer. They believe that if the gun laws were tightened up, that would mean more safety for them. So it's a delicate balance between.
I'm Danielle from Shaw. In the past few years, there has been multiple killing caused by police officers. How do we go about changing our violence if the people we would look for protection and change are also using gun violence?
I really appreciate that question. That is an important part, and we've seen it across the country, that there's been a lot of debate. There have been some tragedies around violence with law enforcement. It starts with training. It starts with more mental health services for people in general, and it starts, I believe, with a coordinated response, so that if there's a mental health situation, the first people that are called are mental health professionals. The second people that are called are police officers, not the other way around, because we've lost people because it was a situation that got out of hand on a law enforcement side, when it really probably would have been best handled by mental health professionals. So I think we need to continue to work at that, but it's a crisis of our times right now, in terms of trying to identify. Because when you're a little kid, what are you told? The police officer is your friend. If you are in trouble, go to the police officer. And so I think we need work on that, because the police officers are human beings. And I think with improved training, we can get to a place where there's some kind of balance. But right now, things are out of balance. The other thing I think is we need to stop giving military equipment to law enforcement. We live in a country where when military equipment is laying around and they have nowhere to send it, they send it to police departments for them to use. I don't think that's a good idea, because frankly, our communities are not war zones, although some of them feel like it for the people that are living there. They need to be places of safety and fun and just living your life. We do not need military equipment in our communities.
I believe, as far as the police officers, it's so true that when a police officer get a call, they know what type of call it is, whether it's domestic violence, whether it's a person with a gun. And I believe, like she said, we do need a mediator to go out first before. I mean, the cops can be around if it escalates to another point, because the minute a person sees a police officer, they're angry, they're mad, they're upset, and then things get out of hand. And that's how a lot of the accidental deaths, because of anger, upset. I see a police officer, automatically something's going to happen to me. But I do believe if we have someone as a mediator, somebody with a mental type of psychiatrist or whatever in the backgrounds, maybe that would help, because the police officers, when they get that call, they know exactly what call that they're going after.
And truly, at least with the city of Cleveland, with the decree that they've had to follow, one of the things at the top of the list is with the retraining, and also is applying more training for mental health kinds of issues. Because a long time ago, police officers, when they showed up, they were mediators. That was their main job. And in many communities, that is their main job right now. For the rest of our communities, we just need to get back there to that point.
So we'll have to keep the answers short for this one. We have room for one last question.
Okay. My name is Tiara Alexander. I'm from Shaw High School. My question today is, do you feel that if youth today, especially in inner cities, had a better perception and relationship of their police officers, of their local police officers who carry guns on a daily basis, that it would help decrease the amount of youth who carry guns and have it in their possession?
I'm not sure I understand.
So do you feel that because of the amount, do young people feel that with police officers in their communities that have firearms, do they feel safe enough to where they don't feel the need to own or carry firearms?
Well, we would hope so, right? That's the intention of having an armed police officer in your community. They're supposed to be there to protect you from the bad people, you not being the bad person, right? And so I think of all the discussion we had before, we need to get back to that. There's a lot of talk about having police officers walking a beat rather than just driving around in their car, because they get to know people. A lot of times in the summer, police officers are on bicycles. That helps. You can stop, you can talk to people. So any of the human contact, more human contact that we have, I think the less than antagonism we have in the long run.
And I believe that the layoffs that we've had in the city, as far as the police officers, I think they need to kind of employ more in the community, in the cities, in the inner cities, in the suburbs, so people can get to know their police officers and get to know, have a relationship with them. Because that's what, like she said, that's what we used to do. We used to handshake and talk to different, the type of police officers with the horses and things like that, being friendly with everybody. And I think that's what we're not at, is, you know, all that is being eliminated because of not having enough funds or not having this. But those are the things that we need, and to show the community that we care.
Kristen?
Thank you, Tiolu. Hello, my name is Kirsten Pamales. I'm the secretary of the Youth Forum Council. I just wanted to thank you guys all once again for attending our last forum of the season. And thank you so much to our amazing panelists today, and thank you to Yolu as well. Our forum is now adjourned.
For information on upcoming speakers or for podcasts of the City Club, go to cityclub.org.
Production and distribution of City Club Forums on IdeaStream is made possible by the generous support of PNC and the Raskin Family Fund, with additional funding from Cleveland State University, Robert Conrad, and the Payne Fund.